What happens when a music legend who has spent decades earning respect and admiration from millions of fans around the world walks onto a television set expecting a friendly conversation, only to be ambushed by a host who seems determined to tear him down in front of a live studio audience? It only took 29 seconds of Denise Welch's relentless attacks for one of rock and roll's most iconic voices to reach his breaking point and deliver a moment of television that nobody in that studio will ever forget. The Loose Women set was buzzing with its usual energy. The cameras were rolling, the audience was settled in their seats, and Rod Stewart had just taken his place on the famous couch. He looked relaxed, dressed smartly in one of his signature sharp suits, his distinctive hair perfectly styled. This was supposed to be a celebration. Rod was there to talk about his latest album, his upcoming tour, and to share some stories from his incredible career that has spanned more than 5 decades. Sitting across from him was the panel. Denise Welch sat in the center, her posture confident, almost aggressive. Next to her was Ruth Langsford, who kept glancing at her notes nervously. On the other end sat Colleen Nolan, looking uncomfortable, and Janet Street Porter, who was already raising her eyebrows at something Denise had whispered before they went live. The show opened with the usual pleasantries. The theme music faded out, and Denise jumped right in with her introduction. Welcome back, everyone. Now, our next guest needs absolutely no introduction. He is a legend, a rock icon, and apparently he is here to tell us all about his new music. Please welcome Rod Stewart. The audience applauded warmly. Rod smiled and waved, his demeanor friendly and open. He settled into his seat, ready for what he thought would be a fun interview. "Thanks for having me, ladies. It is always nice to be here," Rod said, his voice warm and genuine. Denise did not waste any time with small talk. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Rod with an intensity that immediately felt different from the usual banter. "So, Rod, let me just get straight to it. Your new album. You are calling it a return to form. But is not that just code for admitting that your recent work has been, well, not quite up to scratch?" The smile on Rod's face faltered slightly. Ruth shifted in her seat, clearly surprised by the aggressive opening. The audience fell silent, sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the studio. "I would not say that at all," Rod replied, keeping his composure. "I am very proud of everything I have released. This new album is just me, exploring different sounds, trying new things. That is what artists do." Denise let out a short, sharp laugh that echoed across the set. It was dismissive, almost mocking. "Artists, right? But Rod, come on, when was the last time you had a real hit? I mean, a song that people actually cared about. You have been coasting on your old classics for years now, have you not?" Colleen Nolan's eyes widened. She looked over at Janet, who was now sitting completely still, watching the exchange with a mixture of shock and fascination. Ruth tried to interject. "Denise, I think that is a bit—" But Denise cut her off with a raised hand, not even looking at Ruth. Her focus remained locked on Rod. "No, Ruth, let me finish. I think the public deserves honesty. We have Rod Stewart here, a man who made some great music decades ago, and now he is trying to stay relevant. Is that not what this is really about? Staying relevant?" Rod's jaw tightened. His hands, which had been resting casually on his lap, now gripped the edge of the couch, but he maintained his professionalism. He took a breath before responding, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I make music because I love it. I have been doing this since I was a teenager. Relevance is not something I worry about. I have fans all over the world who come to my shows, who buy my records. That is enough for me." Denise leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Her expression was one of barely concealed contempt. She glanced at the audience before turning back to Rod. "Fans who come to hear Maggie May and Do You Think I'm Sexy for the 1,000th time, you mean? Not exactly groundbreaking, is it? I mean, when was the last time you wrote something that actually challenged yourself as an artist? Rod shifted in his seat, his discomfort becoming more visible. Every album challenges me. Every song is a new experience. Just because the public knows my classic hits does not mean I have stopped growing as an artist. Denise let out another dismissive laugh. Growing? Really? Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you have been doing the same thing for the past 30 years. Same sound, same style, same everything. The audience gasped. A few people whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable with where this was heading. Janet, street porter, finally spoke up. Denise, that is actually quite rude. Rod is a guest on our show. Denise turned to Janet with an icy stare. I am just asking the questions that everyone is thinking, Janet. Is that not what we do here? Have honest conversations? Rod took a deep breath, visibly trying to keep his cool. His voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now. There is a difference between honest conversation and being disrespectful. I came here to talk about my music, not to be insulted. Denise smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of someone who knew they were getting under someone's skin and was enjoying it. Insulted? Oh, Rod, if you cannot handle a few tough questions, maybe you should not be doing interviews. This is the real world, not some adoring fan club meeting. Ruth tried again to steer the conversation elsewhere. Rod, why don't you tell us about the tour? I am sure our audience would love to hear about... Once again, Denise spoke over her. Actually, Ruth, I want to talk about something else. Rod, let us discuss your personal life for a moment. You have been married, 3 times? 4 times? I lose count. And you have how many children? 8? 9? Rod's expression darkened. This was clearly crossing a line. His voice became noticeably harder. I have 8 wonderful children, and I am very proud of all of them. What does that have to do with my music? Denise shrugged, her tone dripping with false innocence. She looked at the camera briefly before returning her attention to Rod. I'm just wondering if maybe, just maybe, you have been so busy with your complicated personal life that you have not had time to focus on making quality music. It is a valid question, is it not? I mean, 8 children with different women, that must be quite distracting. Rod's face flushed visibly. He leaned forward slightly. My family life is personal, and I would appreciate it if you would respect that. Every single one of my children knows they are loved. I am present in their lives. Denise tilted her head, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Present? That is an interesting word choice. How present can you be when you are touring all the time, playing those oldies to audiences who are living in the past? Colleen Nolan looked horrified. She leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. Denise, I really think we should move on from this line of questioning. But Denise was not done. She had momentum now, and she seemed determined to push even further. Oh, come on, Colleen. We talk about everyone's personal lives on this show. Why should Rod be any different? Or is it because he is a man? Are we giving him special treatment? Rod's face was flushed now. His legendary charm and good humor were being tested in a way they rarely had been before. My personal life is my business. I treat all of my children's mothers with respect. I am a good father, and none of this has anything to do with why I am here today. Denise tilted her head, her voice taking on an even more condescending tone. A good father? That is interesting, because I have read some interviews from people who might disagree with that assessment. But sure, let us take your word for it. The studio was now completely silent, except for Denise's voice. Even the crew members behind the cameras looked uncomfortable. Ruth was staring at her hands, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. Janet was shaking her head slowly. Rod's voice, when he spoke, was controlled, but filled with barely contained anger. What exactly are you trying to achieve here, Denise? You invited me on your show. I came here in good faith, and all you have done since I sat down is attack me. Denise leaned forward again, her eyes gleaming with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Attack you? I am just having a conversation, Rod. If you feel attacked, maybe that says more about you than it does about me. Maybe you are just not used to people being honest with you. Maybe you are surrounded by yes men who tell you everything you do is brilliant when it is not. That was it. Rod had reached his limit. He stood up abruptly, his microphone still clipped to his jacket. The sudden movement caused a loud feedback noise through the speakers. You know what, Denise? I have been in this business for over 50 years. I have dealt with tough interviews, difficult journalists, and people who genuinely wanted to have challenging conversations. But what you are doing right now is not journalism. It is not conversation. It is just cruelty dressed up as honesty. And I will not be part of it. Denise remained seated, but her expression shifted slightly. For the first time, she looked like she might have pushed too far, but she tried to maintain her aggressive stance, her voice rising. Oh, please, do not be so dramatic, Rod. Sit back down. We are just getting started. You cannot handle a few tough questions? Rod laughed, but it was a bitter sound. He shook his head slowly. Tough questions? You call what you have been doing asking tough questions? You have not asked me a single thing about my music. Not one question about the album I came here to discuss. Instead, you have attacked my career, my personal life, my family. That is not journalism, Denise. That is just you being nasty. The audience murmured in agreement. Several people nodded their heads. Denise's face reddened slightly. I am being honest. Something you clearly cannot handle. Rod pointed at her, his finger trembling slightly. No, you are being cruel. There is a massive difference, and if you cannot see that, then I feel sorry for you. Getting started? No, Denise. We are finished. I am not going to sit here and let you disrespect me, my family, or my career, just so you can feel important, or get some viral moment for your show. Ruth finally found her voice, speaking quickly. Rod, please, I am so sorry about this. This is not how we normally conduct interviews. Please, can we start over? But Rod was already unclipping his microphone. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of standing up for himself. Ruth, you seem lovely. And Colleen, Janet, you tried to step in. I appreciate that. But I cannot stay here. I will not stay here. Denise stood up now, her voice rising. So you are just going to walk off? How very professional of you, Rod. Running away when things get a little bit uncomfortable. Rod turned to face her directly, his voice steady and clear. Uncomfortable? You think this is about being uncomfortable? I have performed in front of hundreds of thousands of people. I have dealt with critics my entire career. But what you are doing is not criticism. You invited me here under false pretenses. You told my team this would be a friendly interview about my music. Instead, you have spent the entire time trying to humiliate me. Denise crossed her arms again, her chin raised defiantly. I asked you legitimate questions. If you cannot handle that, maybe you should not do interviews at all. Rod shook his head, a sad smile crossing his face. Legitimate questions? You attacked my music without listening to it. You mocked my personal life. You questioned my ability as a father. Those are not legitimate questions, Denise. Those are personal attacks. And I am done with it. Janet Street Porter stood up as well, her voice loud and clear. He is right, Denise. This has been absolutely out of order. Rod, I am genuinely sorry. This is not what our show is about. Colleen nodded in agreement, her face red with embarrassment. I am so sorry, Rod. Really, truly sorry. But Denise was not backing down. If anything, Rod's decision to leave seemed to make her even more aggressive. Oh, so now I am the bad guy? I am just doing my job. If Rod cannot handle a strong woman asking him tough questions, that is his problem, not mine. Rod stopped at the edge of the set, turning back one more time. A strong woman? Is that what you think this is? Denise, I know plenty of strong women. My daughters are strong women. My wife is a strong woman. Strong women do not need to tear others down to feel powerful. They lift people up. What you did here today was not strength. It was just mean. The audience began to applaud. It started with just a few people, but within seconds, most of the studio audience was clapping for Rod. Some were even standing. Denise's face went pale as she realized that the audience, the same audience she performed for every day, was supporting the guest she had just attacked. "Oh, brilliant," Denise said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. A standing ovation for a man who cannot handle a few questions. This is exactly what is wrong with society today. Everyone is so sensitive. Ruth stood up as well, her voice shaking with emotion. "Denise, stop. Just stop. You have gone too far." But Denise was on a roll now, seemingly unable to control herself. "I have gone too far? I am the only one here willing to be honest. The rest of you are just sitting there, nodding along, being nice. Well, I am not here to be nice. I am here to ask the questions that matter." Rod, who had been walking away, paused and turned back one final time. His voice was quieter now, but it carried across the entire studio. "The questions that matter. Let me tell you what matters, Denise. What matters is treating people with dignity. What matters is respect. What matters is remembering that behind every celebrity, every musician, every guest on your show, there is a real human being with feelings. You forgot that today, and that is really sad." With that, Rod Stewart walked off the Loose Women set. The cameras followed him as he made his way through the backstage area, crew members stepping aside, some of them giving him supportive nods. The audience was still applauding, the sound filling the studio. Back on the set, Denise stood alone at the panel desk. Ruth had sat back down, her head in her hands. Colleen was wiping tears from her eyes. Janet was staring at Denise with an expression of pure disappointment. "Well," Denise said, trying to regain some control of the situation, "I guess we will have to go to a commercial break early. Apparently, some people cannot handle real journalism." But her voice lacked its earlier confidence. The cockiness was gone. She looked around at her fellow panelists, perhaps hoping for some support, but found none. Ruth would not even look at her. Colleen was shaking her head slowly. Janet just sighed deeply. A producer's voice came through the speakers, calling for a commercial break. As the cameras cut away, Denise finally sat down. The studio audience was still buzzing with conversation, many of them clearly on Rod's side. One audience member called out, "That was disgraceful, Denise." Another shouted, "You should apologize." Denise's hands were shaking now as she reached for her glass of water. She took a long drink, her eyes darting around the studio. For someone who had seemed so confident just minutes ago, she now looked lost. Ruth leaned over, her voice low but audible to those nearby. "What were you thinking, Denise? Why would you do that to him? What was the point?" Denise set her glass down with a thud. "I was doing my job, Ruth. Someone has to ask the hard questions." Janet let out a harsh laugh. "Hard questions? You were being cruel, Denise. There is a difference. That man has done nothing to you. He came here to promote his album, and you treated him like he was on trial." Colleen nodded, her voice soft, but firm. "She's right. That was not an interview. That was an ambush, and it was painful to watch." Denise's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a production assistant approached the desk, whispering urgently to her. Whatever the assistant said made Denise's face go even paler. The commercial break seemed to last forever. In the studio, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Audience members continued to whisper among themselves. Some were filming on their phones. capturing the aftermath of what had just transpired. When they came back from the break, Denise's demeanor had changed entirely. The aggressive confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. "Welcome back to Loose Women," she said, her voice noticeably less steady than before. "As you just saw, our interview with Rod Stewart ended earlier than planned. We will be discussing what happened after this next break." But the damage was done. The energy in the studio had completely shifted. What was supposed to be a lighthearted morning talk show had turned into something else entirely. A moment where a legendary musician had been pushed to his breaking point by a host who seemed more interested in creating conflict than having a genuine conversation. Backstage, Rod was sitting in a quiet corner, being attended to by his manager and publicist. They were both apologizing profusely, telling him they had no idea the interview would go that way. Rod waved them off. "It is not your fault," he told them. "You could not have known she would be like that. I could not sit there anymore. I have been through a lot in my life, but that was something else." His manager nodded sympathetically. "You did the right thing, Rod. You stood up for yourself. That took courage." Rod smiled sadly. "I did not want it to come to that. I really did not. I came here to talk about music, to have a laugh, to connect with the audience. Instead, I got attacked for no reason." Back on the set, the show was struggling to continue. Denise tried to move on to other topics, but the other panelists were clearly still upset. Ruth's responses were clipped and brief. Colleen kept sighing deeply. Janet made several pointed comments about the importance of treating guests with respect and dignity. The atmosphere was thick with tension and awkwardness. The audience could feel it too. The usual warmth and fun of Loose Women had evaporated completely. Instead, there was an uncomfortable awareness that everyone had just witnessed something they should not have seen. A breakdown in basic courtesy and professionalism that left everyone unsettled. One audience member raised her hand during a segment, and when called upon, she spoke directly to Denise. Her voice was clear and confident. "I just want to say that I have been watching this show for years, and I have never seen a guest treated the way you treated Rod Stewart. He is a legend, and he deserved better. What you did was absolutely disgraceful." The audience erupted in applause again. Some people stood up. Others were shaking their heads at Denise. Denise's smile became fixed and plastic. Her jaw clenched. "Well, everyone is entitled to their opinion," she said tersely, her voice tight. But the audience member was not done. She stood up fully now, addressing not just Denise, but the entire panel. "It is not just my opinion. Everyone here saw what happened. You were rude, you were dismissive, and you were cruel. He came here in good faith, and you ambushed him. You should be ashamed of yourself." More applause. Denise looked like she wanted to disappear. Ruth reached over and gently touched Denise's arm, perhaps trying to offer some support, but Denise pulled away. As the show finally drew to a close, the usual upbeat energy was nowhere to be found. The panelists said their goodbyes, thanked the audience, and the cameras cut. Immediately, Denise stood up and walked off the set without speaking to anyone. In the green room, Rod was preparing to leave. Several crew members approached him, apologizing for what had happened and telling him they were fans of his music. Rod was gracious with all of them, thanking them for their kind words. "You handled that with such class," one camera operator told him. "I have been working on this show for years, and I have never seen anything like that. You had every right to be angry." Rod nodded, pulling on his jacket. "I was angry. I still am, to be honest, but I was not going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper completely. I said what I needed to say, and then I left. That is all I could do." The green room door opened, and Ruth Langsford entered. She looked exhausted and embarrassed. "Rod, I am so sorry. Please know that what happened out there does not represent our show or how we normally treat our guests. I am mortified." Rod's expression softened. He could see that Ruth was genuinely upset. "Ruth, I know. You tried to stop it. You and the others tried to intervene. I appreciate that. This is not on you." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "I should have done more. I should have shut it down completely. I froze. I did not know what to do." Rod reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "You did what you could. Denise was on a mission, and nothing was going to stop her. But thank you for trying. That means something." As Rod finally left the building, stepping out into the daylight, he took a deep breath. His car was waiting for him, and his team quickly ushered him inside. As they pulled away from the studio, Rod looked back at the building one last time. Inside the studio, the crew was packing up equipment, and the audience was filing out. Everyone was talking about what they had just witnessed. Some were already posting about it on social media. The consensus was clear. Rod Stewart had been treated unfairly, and Denise Welch had crossed a line. In her dressing room, Denise sat alone, staring at herself in the mirror with a blank expression. Her phone was buzzing constantly with messages and notifications, but she was not looking at it. She knew what they would say. She could already. Imagine the headlines, the social media posts, the criticism that was surely coming her way. For a moment, just a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Was it regret? Doubt? But then it was gone, replaced by the same defiant expression she had worn throughout the interview. Meanwhile, Ruth, Colleen, and Janet gathered in the hallway outside their dressing rooms. They spoke in hushed tones, clearly troubled by what had happened. "I cannot believe she did that," Colleen said, her voice still shaky. "That poor man. He was so gracious at the beginning, and she just kept attacking him." Janet nodded grimly. "I have seen Denise be tough before. We all have. But that was not tough interviewing. That was personal. It was like she had some kind of vendetta against him, and I have no idea why." Ruth wiped her eyes. "The worst part is that Rod was absolutely right. He came here to talk about his music, and she turned it into something ugly. And the audience saw it all. They know what happened." Back in his car, Rod was on the phone with his wife, telling her what had happened. He could hear the anger in her voice as he recounted the interview. "She said, 'What about our family?'" his wife asked, her voice rising. "Who does she think she is?" Rod tried to calm her down. "It is okay, love. I handled it. I walked out. I was not going to sit there and let her continue. But I am all right. Really, I am." But even as he said the words, he could feel the residual anger and hurt from the experience. It was not often that Rod Stewart, a man who had faced down massive crowds and intense media scrutiny for decades, felt genuinely rattled by an interview. But this had been different. This had been personal in a way that caught him off guard. His manager, sitting next to him in the car, was already fielding calls from various media outlets wanting Rod's response to what had happened. But Rod shook his head. "Tell them I have nothing more to say. What happened in that studio speaks for itself. I do not need to add anything to it." As the day wore on, the incident continued to reverberate. People who had been in the audience were sharing their experiences online. Clips of the confrontation were being discussed and analyzed. And through it all, one thing remained clear. Rod Stewart had maintained his dignity in the face of an unprovoked attack, while Denise Welch had revealed something about herself that many viewers found deeply troubling. The legendary rock star had walked into that studio expecting a friendly chat, and had instead found himself in a hostile environment. But he had not backed down. He had not lost his composure completely. He had simply stood up, said his piece, and walked away with his head held high. And in doing so, he had shown exactly why he had remained a respected figure in the music industry for more than 5 decades. Because true class, as Rod Stewart demonstrated that day, is not about how you act when everything is going your way. It is about how you handle yourself when someone is trying to tear you down.